Kia ora. If you guys that want to sit down can sit down, we'll get started. I am face out, so you do have permission to film me, but only if I look really, really good. I was told to give an announcement of where the bathrooms were, but I have forgotten. It is that way. All right. Thanks. Okay, I'm going to get started. My name is Laura, and yes, that is my real name. Consider this my second time coming out of the closet. I have been a dancer in adult entertainment venues for 5 years. I'm a postgrad student at Victoria University and will be graduating this year with a master's in philosophy, politics, and economics. Most importantly, I am one of the 19 recently fired from Calendar Girls Wellington and one We want to thank everybody here in attendance for taking the time to hear us speak about the systemic, pervasive injustices in adult entertainment industry Aotearoa. Support that you gave inspired the hope that empowered us to step out of the shadows and fight to improve our labor rights. I would like to draw attention to the bravery and the hard work of the Fired Up Stilettos. We haven't had much sleep recently. The Fired Up Stilettos that are here with us tonight and those who can't be here physically without risking their jobs. Last of all, we want to thank all sex workers, past and present, whose shoulders we are standing on today. All right, we're going to get into it now. Got the formalities out of the way. Everybody in Aotearoa deserves to be respected at work and deserves fair working conditions. The legal and social barriers that confront us as dancers are because of the considerable attention drawn to what we do for work and the historically non-existent concern for us as legitimate workers and as human beings. Like all sex workers, when we go public, we must either do so anonymously or face the increased threat of being discriminated against socially, in employment, in banking, in housing, and through our freedom of movement internationally. If we have children, then we must also consider whether they will suffer consequences by association. These are the conditions of being tolerated in society. These are the conditions of being perceived as less than, not because of who you are, but because of how people feel about what you do. Venue owners capitalize on sustaining these. As long as we are disempowered and unprotected as workers, then they will continue to be empowered to subject us to labor violations that are a stain on the reputation of workers' rights in Aotearoa. Venues are aware of the considerable barriers that we face in being able to stand up for ourselves or assert our rights as workers. This is why the legal pathways available to achieve justice for contractors in our industry are not enough to make any kind of positive change. Our aspirations for change is what we will be speaking to you all about this evening. These changes will protect dancers from ever having to know firsthand the kinds of systemic injustices that all of us speaking here tonight have lived through our labor. As strippers, we learn the art form of our labor from the people that come before us. It is not an easy job, and we are not uneducated, and we are not unskilled workers. I challenge anyone who holds these ideals to walk a 10-hour shift in our 8-inch heels. You couldn't. I think some of you were like, could I? The purpose of our meeting here tonight is for our community to be able to speak in plain terms about the conditions on the ground for workers in our industry. These conditions have and continue to deteriorate for the worse over the past decade. These are not associated with what we do for work, but rather speak to the actions of the people who hold the power over the context of our labor. I will be passing over to my comrades who will be coming up to speak one by one about why it is that we so desperately require new protections in adult entertainment. We will then open to questions in the room before hearing some words from Jan. I haven't asked her, but it'll be fine. Just an assumption. Thanks, Jan. We urge you to listen closely to those who are traditionally silenced. Understand the strength and courage required to raise our voices and respond with action now. I would now like to invite Ginger up to speak on the issue of contract negotiation in our industry. Thank you.
Thank you, Laura. Hello, everyone. My name's Ginger, also known online as Anna. I've been dancing over 7 years now for a handful of clubs up and down the country, but longest and most consistently in Wellington. To me, the nature of my work is near irrelevant to the discussion we are having today. This is a contractors' rights issue. Having international friends in the same industry also classed as independent contractors, they are always shocked at how behind our strip clubs are and how little power the contractors have here. New Zealand was a world leader in sex workers' rights, but I find that sentiment hollow now. The act of signing a collective petition wasn't an attempt at cartel bargaining, it was an act of desperation. Individual negotiation is not viable with the current culture of our industry. While on paper in this country, independent contracts are up for individual negotiation, this is not true in the strip club in any real sense. For example, our last contract change prior to this one changed the workers' monies received for a $375 booking from $187 to $162.50. We were not presented with a new contract at this time. We were simply told it was so on shift on the day. When people contested they had not signed any change in pay rate, we were told it was because running these bookings was more expensive and we didn't really have a choice. No negotiation or suggestion of compromise would be heard. We were told to be grateful we even got so much money at all. New contracts with updated pricing were not presented until several months later, and signing was enforced by management handing them out in the dressing room and waiting to collect the signed ones before workers left the room to go onto the main floor. If that is not intimidation and coercion of your workers, I don't know what is. Every year of the 7 I have worked in this industry, I have seen workers attempt to negotiate the terms and find themselves suddenly fired for something unrelated a week or so later. Sorry, I've just seen so many people lose their jobs over the shit. Usually 1 or 2 at a time. I have seen pro-union or collectivizing notices placed in dressing rooms by dancers torn down and mocked by management and owners, and then replaced with memos reiterating a general sentiment of like it or lump it. I have seen workers who attempt to organize their peers internationally intentionally be placed at greater risk by being singled out to receive worse response times or even no security response when customers break rules or hurt them, and this is done at managers' instructions in multiple clubs. Anyone who has contested fines rapidly find themselves out of work and humiliated in front of their peers by management. Imagine you are 20 years old and new to the job. You have You have just about made rent and groceries worth of commissions before tax out of a tough crowd this week. You take a break that you're entitled to in the dressing room to recharge so you can come back out with a smile and energy so you can snag another dance and have some small breathing room in your budget this week. However, in the 15 minutes you were sitting down, the foot traffic has picked up downstairs. Management comes in and demand to know why you are loitering in the dressing room. But before you can say, I'm on a break, management has fined you $200 and you are back to not making rent this week. You cry because you are young, trying your best, and now your income has been stolen from you for daring to sit down and collect yourself. You cry because you know if you tell management they can't actually take that money from you, you will have no job next week. In no other commission industry would I see this. Michael Hill salespeople are not having half their money seized for taking a break they're entitled to. Kiosk people at farmers are not penalized for eating lunch and leaving makeup counters briefly unattended. Why should we be? The fear and fines we are forced to tolerate are not acceptable in other industries and shouldn't be in ours either, but the establishments in question will not stop until they are made to stop. A strip club owner I spoke to, when I said, you know you cannot enforce these fines, right, said I don't use them. And when I asked why they then weren't removed from the contracts, he replied, they're just in the contract to keep the girls in line. These business owners know they are using thuggish and threatening tactics, but they don't care to cease doing so as it keeps workers underfoot and submissive. In some clubs, these fines are even awarded personally to the managers that enforce them rather than the company. This further encourages the culture of penalty and to me is just theft. These fines rob us of our ability to practice reasonable boundaries between our lives and work. My father is dying. I found out an hour before my shift started. And honestly, it felt like I had very little choice but to go to work anyway. I would have no choice in paying a fine if management elected to issue one, as it would simply be taken out of my last week's earnings before the remainder was turned over to me on payday. Process my father being terminal and pay a $250 fine that I cannot really afford that week to not come into my shift, or put on more eyeliner and try my best to be professional. I used to say I danced because money buys you time and choices, like mental health breaks, self-care, healthcare, and many other opportunities I wouldn't otherwise be able to access. This current working climate doesn't really feel like I could say that anymore. How can making my own money and hours buy me choices if the clubs are allowed to snatch them away from us with impunity? Strippers and contractors need a regulatory body for contract review. Clubs rely on us entering the industry young and not knowing any better, and not knowing they can't enforce half of these documents, not knowing or being able to challenge confidently the blatant wage theft and coercion. A regulatory body for independent contractor agreements of all industries would strip the absolute and abusive level of power these companies have and allow for more equitable agreements for all. I don't want to feel small. I don't want to be a number on a till. I want to be treated with dignity like a person by my employer. And I really don't think that is too much to ask this parliament to help us achieve.
Hi all. Thank you for coming in or tuning in today. It is a privilege to be able to stand here in front of you and be heard, even if it is terrifying. For those that don't know me, I'm Skylar. I am, I suppose, what people would call a career stripper. I started stripping when I was 18, and now I'm 30. Over the last 12 years, I've worked in various parts of the sex industry, stripping, massaging, and more at some of the best and worst clubs, both around New Zealand and Australia. I've even shot for multiple international men's magazines, including shooting for Penthouse in Costa Rica and Playboy in Bali. So to say I've been around is an understatement. Over the last 12 years, I've seen the treatment of dancers in New Zealand strip clubs go from bad to worse. Our society has thankfully progressed into a more sex positive one, with strippers becoming famous on Instagram and TikTok, glamorizing our industry and making it less taboo. However, the clubs have decided to capitalize on that influx of keen young women by slowly lowering the standards by which they treat us, changing the rules bit by bit, firing or silencing anyone who decides to speak up along the way. I have seen girls bullied, fined, and fired for standing up for their rights and the rights of others. I have seen abuse, assault, and even rape swept under the rug under threat of having one's income taken away. In the span of 12 years, our cuts have gone from 80% to 60%, and now it seems that many clubs think 50% is all we're entitled to for our hard work. So suffice to say, when they tried to reduce our cuts at Calendar Girls Wellington to 50% for a standard lap dance, 44% for spa bookings, and down to a measly 39.6% for a strippogram, we were not happy. When we decided to make our petition to Calendar Girls, we thought, surely if we stand together and make it clear that we all have a problem, they can't fire all of us. But they did. Within 24 hours of sending our letter, 19 out of 35 of us who signed were asked to clear our lockers. Fired, albeit ambiguously, told, "You're not fired, you just can't work." They did this publicly in a Facebook group with 58 of our co-workers, sending a clear message: those who question the authority of the club are not welcome. Our contract had procedures for termination, requiring 5 days written notice. However, we were given less than 48 hours to come in before work started and remove our belongings. As contractors, and I say contractors, even though to be honest, they really treat us like employees, there are many, many hoops we have to jump through in order to hold them accountable. It is time for strip clubs to be held to a higher standard. No longer can they take away our incomes with little to no procedure, tossing us out as though we were disposable. It is time to kick up a fuss. I'd now like to pass the microphone to Karma to speak to you about yet more of the issues we face as contractors in the adult entertainment industry.
So now that I've chucked on my really cool mask, you guys are welcome to film me. So tēnā koutou katoa, ko Karma tuku ingoa. Thank you so much for this opportunity to speak today and shine a light on the issues that we as dancers face in our industry. I want to stress that the nature of our work is not the problem. The problems arise with club management robbing us of the control over how we do our work. I have been dancing for 7 years, and I've had an equal share of both positive and negative experiences. What is the key difference that will influence that experience? Management. When the management of a club employs coercive and exploitative contracts and systems, we lose our power to set and assert the personal boundaries that keep us safe. Fines, bonds, and non-compete clauses are common practice within our industry. Some clubs have bonds of $1,000, which you have taken out of your pay in random increments and may not have fully reimbursed to you once you conclude your time working there, should management decide you owe them compensation for something. These contracts also list fines ranging from $100 to $500 for offences such as being too unwell to work or having what they decide is an unkept appearance. Management have full discretion over the decision to issue these fines or keep bond money. And as the money is taken directly at our pay, we have no opportunity to dispute this. What I consider to be one of the most problematic fines is for being rude to customers. When I'm in a club managed by people who I know support me, I'm empowered to set clear boundaries with each customer and maintain them. Should a customer try to cross those boundaries, I can have them removed from the venue. To continue enjoying the luxury of the service I am providing, you need to respect me and comply with the rules I have set. However, imagine working in a club with the fear of fines hanging over your head. What if a customer gets upset because I've ended a dance with them due to them failing to follow the rules I have set? What if they complain to management, who I don't believe have my back? Can I afford to potentially lose a few $100s to fines? Should I just tolerate it? And just like that, the threat of being fined leads to your personal boundaries being forced to slide. And you start losing the power to determine how someone touches your body, how you do your work, and how you keep yourself safe. I have been in this position, and I can tell you that fear of repercussions is coercion. Another issue is the non-compete clauses clubs incorporate into their contracts to prevent dancers from working for any rival companies or clubs. After the first round of COVID lockdowns, I traveled 2 hours to a city to work after not having an income for months. Prior to the start of my shift, I went and did a performance at a stag party. I encouraged the stag party to come into the club that night and even gave several of them a lift there as I drove into work. Despite the fact I actively promoted the club and drove paying customers to the venue, at the conclusion of the shift, the club owner informed me I was going to be fined $1,000 as I had done a job for a competitor that was in their territory. They made me stand outside and wait while they forced all the other dancers to vote on whether or not I should be fined. Finally, I was told they were going to do me a favor. They weren't going to fine me a full $1,000. They were only going to fine me my entire paycheck for the night, but I was welcome back anytime. I had been doing back-to-back shows for hours. I had paid travel and accommodation to be there. Working to lose money that night had not been part of my plan during a time of significant financial stress, uncertainty, and fear. I tried to appeal to the manager that I needed that money, but they didn't care. If fines and bonds didn't exist, maybe I wouldn't have to choose between my income being threatened or upholding my boundaries. If non-compete clauses didn't exist, maybe clubs would actually have to be a nice place to work to attract contractors to work there. It's time for the venues to do better, and someone needs to hold them to account. We tried and we got fired, so we're appealing for your help. Thank you for your time. I'd like to invite Logie.
Tēnā koutou katoa, and thank you for giving me the opportunity to speak tonight. My name is Logie, and yes, I am still protecting my real name. I have been a stripper for 3.5 years, and all of that time was spent in the Calendar Girls machine. I will be speaking about the exploitative profit sharing in our industry. What we refer to as a cut is the distinction between what we earn from our labor and what the venue extracts from us. When customers ask us how much money we get from the amount they wish to spend on us, it is typical in our industry to lie about the amount that the venue takes from us. I learnt this as a baby stripper, day one. If you tell them, they won't want to spend money on you because they don't like that you don't get enough of it, is what is echoed around the minds of all dancers. Keep quiet, keep it sexy, earn the money, give the club their piece of the pie and accept it. And that piece of pie has been getting larger and larger. When my fellow fired up comrade told me in 2015, venues only took a 20% cut of dancers' booked services, I was shocked. I had never heard of this. Fast forward to 2023, and they now take up to 61% from every booking every dancer sells. Imagine it's a Saturday night. 30 dancers are on the floor working for 8, sometimes 10 hours. That is a highly competitive environment because you don't know how many customers are going to come in, and you have to take every opportunity you can because you don't earn an hourly wage. Now let's imagine that out of the 30 dancers, 20 managed to sell an hour booking upstairs. 10 don't sell anything at all. To reference Calendar Girls Gold Room, the customers pay $900 for each of their bookings, and each individual dancer takes home $396 before tax deductions, before ACC levies, and before sometimes GST. On the other hand, the club has taken $504 from every contractor's sale and a total collective of $10,080 from all the contractors combined. And that is only the total of theoretically each of those 20 dancers only sold one booking that night. Bear in mind, this does not include the total amount of tips that contractors receive from customers, where the venue traditionally keeps 20%. Venues are also able to charge excessively high prices for alcohol because they have something that other bars don't: dancers. Some of these prices include $14 for a basic beer or wine, $18 for a vodka Red Bull. Now let's imagine 150 people come through the venue that night. They each get just one drink, a simple beer. After the cost of wholesale on each of those beers, the venue makes $1,752 profit. And we all know customers really only buy one single beer. And dancers don't receive a cent. Door charges for entry into the venue on average is up to $30. Now let's imagine that in that 10-hour time frame, those same 150 customers pay entry into that venue. These entry charges are because they have something that other bars don't: dancers. From these entry charges, they have now made a total of $4,500, to which we as contractors do not receive a cent. If these venues cannot run a profitable business without taking over 50% of the earners of every contractor, then I would argue that their business has been set up with exploitation as a prerequisite for success.
When we read academic and theoretical debates around the exploitation in our industry, these debates most always concern some aspect of the work that we do and misguided judgment values on who we are as individuals. When dancers and sex workers speak about feeling exploited, it is usually a result of not being compensated adequately for their labor. We as contractors risk injury, illness, sexual assault, ostracization, and violence as a result of the stigma that exists in our society and the lack of security and care from management. If venues are able to take larger and larger pieces of pie, where will it end? 70% of the venue? 80%? This is not a safe or sustainable future for dancers, and I hope to never see this become a reality. Thank you, and I will pass to my comrade, Eve.
Katoa. Thank you. Ko Eve toku ingoa. I am a recent graduate of a Bachelor of Health at Te Herenga Waka Vic Uni. Until I was fired, I worked at Calendar Girls in Pōneke and occasionally in Tamaki Makaurau and Ōtautahi. It helps to behave well at any job, but in this one, I was well behaved because I was bullied into it, and to be well behaved was to be meek and silent. A manager is supposedly there to provide clarity and guidance, but when I sought it, I was often shouted at and sworn at for asking for simple things such as verification on how much money I made on the till system so that I could be paid correctly. Over my 7-year career, I learned to fear management. I once got fined for being dangerously drunk on medication, and instead of being helped home by management, I was followed around and screamed at for what felt like hours until I was lying on the locker room floor crying in fear. The night was a blur, but by the end of my shift, I was alone, outside with no one concerned for how I could get home safe in the state that I was in. I internalized being at fault to the point where I recently admitted to deserving this treatment and getting fined on national radio. I regret this. No one in any job deserves to be fined. I shouldn't have been the one that was made to apologize, and my internalized trauma is such that I now don't know the difference between acceptable and abusive treatment in a workplace. I was otherwise wildly successful in my career, and I do miss the job a lot. As a person who looks out for others, I once broke a record by having one customer book every dancer in a single night to the point where we had to close early because everyone was upstairs in VIP. I was often told by the manager when I was top of the class for the week in earnings because management knew that was what motivated me. But there is a difference between motivating a cash cow and caring for workers as human beings with rights, and I only ever felt the former. Despite my success and the eye-watering amounts of money I made the club, I was treated with so much contempt. Compared to other industry stories, though, mine's a really chill one. Calendar Girls was a supposedly chill club, but let's be real, you only get some semblance of chill treatment in the industry if you allow yourself to be treated like a doormat. By saying this, I want to make it clear that the bar for the treatment of dancers is far too low across the motu. To the dancers present, I've read your stories submitted online, too many of which were too harrowing and traumatic to share. I've witnessed firsthand the abuse of my coworkers and have been too scared to say anything for far too long. I am devastated that this is accepted as normal and that none of us had anyone to turn to restore lasting justice until now, and that I've had to sacrifice my ticket out of poverty to do so. To quote our beloved Poe, Rangatira Georgina Bayer, to do nothing now would be irresponsible of this parliament because the status quo would remain, and that is unacceptable. This is our one chance in perhaps 20 years to do something, or perhaps our one chance until the next 19 dancers are fired en masse. My colleague Molly will elaborate further on the mistreatment that we face in our industry.
Kia ora. Most people think that working as a stripper would be terrifying. When I started stripping, I wasn't scared. I have always chosen jobs that inspire my curiosity and challenge my thinking.
stripping was no different. My name is Molly. I started working at Calendar Girls in 2021. And first, I want to acknowledge the strippers sitting here, many who have endured these working conditions much longer than myself, many of whom have been fired from clubs before this for trying to take the same action that we are taking now. When I started, I had heard from other dancers that the manager could be harsh. I took this with a grain of salt. I had a lot of experience resolving conflict, and I thought that if it came to me, I would be able to work it out. Until the first time I was yelled at by the manager. There is no way to defend yourself when she starts yelling at you. It doesn't matter what you say or how right you are. The only acceptable response is to stand there and take it. I suddenly understood why everyone had told me to stay on her good side, but I had no idea how to do that. This unpredictable, unreasonable bullying breeds a culture of fear and a divided workforce that is easier to control. I was nervous to ask for my pay. I was even nervous to tell her that the girls' dressing room had run out of toilet paper. This abusive behavior impacts every dancer, whether they are targeted or not. You see another dancer get yelled at on the floor. You see people you know to be intelligent and considerate being degraded and harassed in front of everyone in the club, and you know you are not safe. But you love your job, and you love the freedom it gives you. So you accept that walking on eggshells is part of the deal. And it can go the other way too. You see your manager laying into your colleagues, and you know that the only way to feel safe is to side with the manager. And this is where division is born. Imagine my story in the context of every dancer, some severely bullied, some just yelled at every now and then. The result is a workforce of women and gender minorities being routinely abused and exploited in their workplace. And I do not use the term abuse lightly here. Having worked for Wellington Women's Refuge and for police, I have been confronted with the realities of domestic abuse in our country a lot. But even with this knowledge, I did not recognize the abusive environment of the industry while I was working in it, because that is how psychological abuse functions. Clubs gaslight dancers into believing that they are the issue. They are being dramatic. They are overreacting. They are the only one with this problem. Sometimes they are even as blatant as saying that never happened. There are many tactics used by abusers to assert control, and these are often incredibly subtle. If your manager makes you feel like an inconvenience for wanting your money at the end of the night, that is economic control. If your manager is yelling at you because she's in a bad mood, that is emotional abuse. Treating you with contempt if you report a risky customer is minimizing your concerns, your valid concerns. I was one of 19 dancers fired from Calendar Girls after requesting contract negotiation. I was an example to the remaining dancers as to what would happen if they tried to stand up for themselves. Each one of these actions widely fits the accepted definitions of abuse. And it is never easy to escape abuse. It is harder when you are financially dependent on your abuser, which clubs ensure you are by having non-compete contracts in your clauses. Having non-compete clauses in your contracts. It's harder when you have no way to talk about it openly because you've been isolated by social stigma. It is harder when you risk losing your income for even showing an interest in anything that could be considered unionization. Dancers working at clubs in Aotearoa right now have faced the threat of firing for following our movement. As we stand here and explain this to you, our friends and colleagues are facing worsened conditions. The actions of fired up Stilettos have scared management. And when an abuser is scared, they double down. Clubs are working overtime in their efforts to intimidate and divide their workforce. That is why this matter is urgent. Either you support us or you stand by while women and gender minorities are systematically exploited. Aotearoa should not accept this. Now I'd like to pass on to Renee.
Kia ora. My name is Renee. I'm also known in online spaces with my partner Laura as Blake Bambi Wild. My stripping career was more than a job. At the start of my stripping career, I was an uneducated single mother. I had little sex education through no fault of my own, no concept of consent or boundaries. I had concluded that there was no way of getting ahead in Aotearoa as a single mother. With a fire in my belly to provide the best possible life for my children, becoming a stripper empowered me. It allowed me to stop switching power companies every time I struggled to pay the bill. It allowed me to fill Santa stockings on Christmas Eve. Stripping gave me the opportunity to provide for my children without having to sacrifice time with them. I would read my children a bedtime story, kiss them goodnight, and then steal away into the night to make the money needed to put food on the table and maintain a roof over our heads. I did so at Calendar Girls for almost 7 years. And in 2020, I graduated with a BA in Education and Criminology at Victoria University. Experienced strippers educated me that in terms and consent, the word no never needs justification. My booking, my body, my rules, a necessary feature of the job. Over the years, as pricing and commission split changed in favor of the venues, so did management's attitude towards strippers asserting their boundaries. Venues continue to be financially incentivized to allow dangerous customers to remain in the club. This is part of the reason we are here today, saying enough is enough. When strippers experience violence or labor rights violations, we are told to enter the legal system or contact a regulating body to achieve justice. Here are some of the outcomes of seeking justice through those institutions. In 2018, a stripper working in Calendar Girls Christchurch was fired on Facebook. Sound familiar? In the Employment Relations Authority status hearing, the judgment determined that they were independent contractors on the basis that the strippers were in fact the product. The ERA refused to discuss the legalities surrounding the fines, stating they weren't relevant. If we are the product, then why is our income that relies solely on our abilities subjected to deductions of up to 60% by venues? The PRA strictly prohibits fines, yet we sit in a grey area. The judge's decision to not include the fines at all sent a message to our community that we deserve to receive them. You cannot fine a contracted plumber because you perceive them as being rude. So why should strippers accept them? Why should the legislation that governs us condone them? In February 2022, a stripper working at Dreamgirls raised concerns regarding working conditions with WorkSafe after an unsuccessful attempt at mediation. The issues raised included health and safety, holes in the floors, black mold, and consistently leaking toilets. Lack of security. Dreamgirls employed only one security guard each night. And income theft. Dreamgirls consistently fail to provide workers with the correct money they are owed for their work. Along with the documentation submitted, the dancer's statement said, "I have given up trying to make change in such a negative environment, but it is my hope that even though I am no longer there, perhaps something can be done to improve the working conditions of those who have chosen to stay." WorkSafe responded with, "If a worker has a concern about their work situation, they also have a responsibility to their own health and safety, that they will need to raise the issue with their employer to resolve any matters. As stated, we consider the matter closed." For the wealth of reasons that you have all listened to tonight, the idea that we should bring it up with our employer is as helpful as it is ridiculous. In 2020, a stripper who experienced sexual violence working in a Dunedin venue took their case to court, seeking justice for this violation. Instead of justice, what they received was victim blaming, with the defense lawyer, a man by the name of John Munro, implicitly suggesting that sexual assault is justified when working in our industry. Munro stated that there is a degree of consent to touching in that environment. There is no such thing as implied consent within our industry. It is explicit or it does not exist. All of these examples demonstrate that WorkSafe, Employment Relations Authority, and the court system, who are tasked with protecting us, have consistently failed us. That is why we are standing here today, taking matters into our own hands. I would now like to invite Vixen Temple up to speak on her experiences.
Kia ora, I'm Face Out. My name is Vixen Temple. I'm a writer. I'm a performance artist. I'm a sex work activist. I'm a disability activist. I'm a board member of Aotearoa Sex Worker Collective. And I was the stripper in Renee's story that was victim blamed. Kyron Marks pled guilty to an indecent assault, but that is not what happened. I was sexually assaulted that night. And I wanted him tried and found guilty of a sexual assault. But the Crown, as much as he believed me and understood that I was the victim of a crime, advised me to take a plea bargain where we would skip the trial and go straight to the sentencing trial where Kyron Marks would plead guilty to an indecent assault. The reason was that the Crown was concerned that despite the significant evidence to support my case, a jury of my peers would take one look at my line of work and go, is this really a crime? She's just a stripper. Now I'm proud of my job, but I am not just a stripper. I am a citizen of Aotearoa. I am a wahine. I am Ngāti Roa Kawa. I am a human being. And I had my right to a fair trial taken from me because of prejudice and stigma. And I am so tired. And when other strippers come to me about being assaulted to ask whether it was worth going to court, will I receive justice? I want to tell them yes, but that would be a lie. I don't know what justice looks like in Aotearoa, but I do know that because of my line of work, I'm deemed not worthy of receiving it. But I believe that Aotearoa can do better, and this change needs to happen now. And I would just like to add that 2 years after the assault, I texted into work saying I was having a PTSD attack and I did not feel fit to work. And Showgirls fined me $200 for missing that shift. Tēnā koutou. I would like to introduce B to the stage. Ngā mihi.
Kia ora. I'm Bianca Beebe. I'm a sex worker, public health researcher, and co-chair of the Oregon Sex Workers Committee, which is fighting to make Oregon the first state in the United States to decriminalize sex work. As a migratory sex worker whose labor, politics, and organizing are inextricably intertwined, I am consistently struck by how sex workers in every country in which I've organized know about what we're doing right here in New Zealand. Decriminalization is called the New Zealand model. And as far as I'm aware, every organization across the globe led by sex workers, for sex workers' labor rights, promotes decriminalization and tries to learn from what was accomplished here 20 years ago. The movement initiated by Fired Up Stilettos demonstrates both that the decriminalization of sex work has been an overwhelming success, and it reveals how much further we have to go. I stopped dancing at Calendar Girls years ago, back when dancers still got 80% of what the clubs charged our clients. I instead began independent escort work, where I keep everything I earn. It would probably surprise most people to learn that as a sex worker whose labor now generally consists of being alone in a hotel room with a strange man, I am safer, more legally protected, and have greater control over my labor power than any dancer at a strip club in all of New Zealand. Sex workers are not inherently vulnerable workers. We are rather made vulnerable by policy that allows others to control us. As a stripper turned escort who would laugh in the face of anyone
who try to impose even half of the exploitative conditions strippers have to deal with as an industry standard. I want dancers in this country to be as safe at work and in control of their labor as are we independent escorts. We need Parliament to take this seriously and reform our laws so all workers, unfortunate enough to have a boss, are protected, not just those classed as employees. I feel the urgency of this situation, not just because my comrades in Aotearoa deserve to work free of exploitation, but because I know firsthand the profound global impacts we'll see if we get this right. Aotearoa set the international standard for sex workers' labor rights 20 years ago, and the rest of the world is still struggling to catch up. Now it's time to go further. The fired up stilettos have articulated the vulnerability that arises when stigmatized, precarious gig workers are dependent on a third party to employ their labor power. Yet these workers have none of the protections of employees. This problem is currently playing out all over the world. We have been contacted by dancers in clubs throughout New Zealand, Australia, the USA, and the UK, who are experiencing the exact same struggles with management and are waiting to see how New Zealand, the decrim country, will respond. Will our Parliament kick the can of independent contractors' labor rights down the road, or will it do its job and pass innovative legislation that solves contemporary problems? What we do now matters to everyone because Aotearoa is the model for sex workers' rights. We once again have the opportunity to respond to a clear injustice in a way that will inspire and be emulated across the world. I implore members of Parliament to once again rise to the occasion and show the world how it's done. For some suggestions on how to do exactly that, I'd like to welcome my comrade Logie.
Kia ora, I'm back again. All right, I have the honor of reading out our petition request. We request that the House of Representatives establish the right of adult entertainment workers to collectively bargain while maintaining our independent contractor status, outlaw all fines and bonds between employers and contractors, and establish a nationwide mandatory maximum of 20% that an employer can take from a contractor's profits. Our reasoning: contractors in adult entertainment experience widespread labor exploitation, not due to the sexual nature of our work, but rather because of the lack of legal protections offered to workers who are not employees. Strippers are especially vulnerable to exploitation because we depend on a venue which has resulted in a culture of bullying, income theft, violations of contract law, and sometimes outright labor trafficking. We need nationwide intervention to stop these exploitative practices. And now I will invite Laura back to facilitate our question time.
Jan, would you like to, first of all, thank you so much again. And I'm surprised we even got to walk into the building. So I was gonna wear nipple pasties, but I was told that wasn't allowed. But you guys didn't bring cash, so I didn't. So thank you so much.
See if I can make that work. I just, yeah, sorry. But I just want to speak directly to 19 Fired Stilettos first up, and just acknowledge your bravery. Like, I heard you when you opened with the fear of the consequences of stigma that still exists in our society, and the fact that that plays in on a daily basis for you in the past at work and trying to stand up for your rights. And that's still a reality for lots of your friends right now, right around the country. And it makes me furious that injustice and violence, because that kind of exploitation that's happening in those clubs, whether it's physical or not, it's violence. And you coming together are showing the pathway for change and for safety for others in our community and in their workplaces. I had an interview on the radio today about this, and like at the end, the interview was just like, oh, really, it's just about people having dignity at work, isn't it? I was just like, yes. yes, you got the point. That's what this is about. Fair pay, being part of dignity. And in terms of the response around the detail of the way forward, I do want to add in, I know there are unions here in the room, including Actors Equity. And for everybody who's online listening, who's working, like I'm just going to do a direct pitch. Join. Get their professional assistance in terms of some of the ways of these next steps. You're doing a phenomenal job. I've got to say, I've loved the protests. Like there is an energy, like the skill of your dancing. Somebody asked me if I wanted to have a go in the pole. And that was my response. like it is a skilled thing. And kind of, I'm just like, how do you do that? No, I'm not going to put my back out. So I just but the creativity of that organizing, part of me is hoping that that provides like inspiration to other contractors in other industries to think about how they might come together and use the specifics of their job to enable New Zealanders to show their support, because that's what I saw on the streets of Wellington was phenomenal support for you, because actually people want people to be treated with dignity and paid fairly. You're a bit of an asshole if you say anything else out loud, right? So you're opening up for your industry, but also for others. And I do just, one of the points around engaging with the union as well as us, and I will stay here with you in solidarity, is that there has been a working group happening between government and the unions and business around contracting, because we have a problem in this country about a lot of people who are told they're contractors, where they might be employees, actually, and of people who are legitimately wanting to be contractors, but they're not. Their conditions are not okay, right? And we saw this happening through the screen workers industry, where there was the decision to organize collectively as contractors. And that required a law change to enable that. And there is the need for a law change. And it was identified through that working group that there needed to be a law change to enable contractors to organize collectively to set industry standards, which is what I'm hearing you say, right? And I absolutely commit to having those conversations politically to try and get that sped up, because it, like, you know, I had tears in my eyes. I may be a little bit of a crier, I will admit that, but it, like, the stories, it is unacceptable and intolerable to look away for any longer. So thank you.
So that concludes our speaking and our meeting. We would love to mingle and share some kai together. Thank you all so much for being present and for listening to our voices. And it's been a long time. So thank you.